Well, Allyson, thanks very much for joining us today. It's great to have you here at NASDAQ, and it's great to hear your perspectives on the emissions reduction strategies that positively impact your balance sheet panel that you've just jumped off now to come and speak to us here today. So maybe just following up on some of the things that were brought up on that session and some of the themes that you alluded to, in the context of the energy transition and decarbonisation, energy equipment, services and technology companies play an incredibly important role in applying their strengths to transition-related industries and energy transition-related industries, as well as helping the incumbent industry to run its businesses more cleanly. Baker Hughes has been one of the early sustainability adapters, a frontrunner in heavy AI and emissions detection. So maybe just to kick us off, let's say there's more of an acceptance maybe and an understanding now that we need, or that we will continue to need, oil and gas for many years to come. And the focus has turned to how the oil and gas industry can operate in the most sustainable way possible. How are you helping the incumbent industry to run its businesses more cleanly and more efficiently?
So a couple of ways. So for anyone who's not familiar with our company, we're now comprised of two segments. One is oilfield service and equipment, and the other is the industrial energy technology side. And so people like to put things in buckets. I like to start out like that. Basically, between the two, we've got a pretty similar kind of customer base, right? In that they're depending on whether it's the up, mid, or downstream, they always are looking for efficiencies, right? Mm-hmm. So that's like road stop number one is what can we do to enhance not just your normal efficiency. So classic efficiency for like an oilfield service company was, can we do it faster with less safety instances, et cetera, and lower costs. Now it's, can you do all of those things and reduce emissions? And so for something to have energy transition efficiency, it's got to have that provable emissions reduction off the backside. And the way we're looking at that, and then this will apply on the industrial side, is how are we iterating on products to make sure they become more and more efficient? The next part is then on what's the service that we provide? How do we extend the life of that asset? Mm-hmm. That mature asset solution piece is really critical. You've got the part that's looking at electrification of certain parts of, say, like on LNG or on compression. We also are looking at, everyone is looking for, we've got to do compression, so let's not make sure that there's no methane leakage. So we have zero bleed, okay? So there are a lot of different ways that we're taking the conventional core business and then just applying, like maybe acquiring a company that offers us, like we acquired this company, we call it Brushed, and that is a motor part, it's an electric motor piece. That helps us on the IET side, really thinking about where do we plug that in instead of having it been natural gas fired in the first place. So there's a lot of areas today that we're really getting our sort of core business segments engaged. I guess that's a part of our three-pronged strategy of transforming the core.
Okay, great. And alluding to those two buckets that you're referring to, where is there intersection for energy technology companies like Baker Hughes between the whole incumbent, straightforward fossil fuel or fossil-based businesses and the low-carbon or renewable businesses that are adjacent to that or entirely new altogether?
So as I alluded to with the first question, I said transforming the core. So we have a three-pronged strategy: transforming the core, invest for growth, and then new frontiers. As you start to look at how you pursue each part of that strategy, the new frontier space has a lot of the same kit that our core business uses. It's just a different application space. So the intersection starts with how are we already in the ecosystem? Mm-hmm. And so, for instance, compressors are used in gas compression. It's also used in, well, I guess helium, as well as hydrogen and CO2. And so that there's still a marketplace for that, right? So then it's thinking like, how broad do we want to expand our kit into this new area, right? And continue to grow that. So for something like CCS, on both parts of our segment, they intersect. CCS is one of our growth areas, and it sits in that frontier space. We have the subsurface already for the storage side. That's well baked. We've been in that for many decades now. And so now it's thinking like, do we play in capture? Yes. So we acquired some inorganic kinds of companies so that we could augment what we have in the portfolio today.
Okay, yeah, that's super interesting. And I think I want to allude on some of the points that were brought up on the session earlier today. So around obviously creating financial incentive for companies to pursue some of these decarbonisation strategies and emissions reduction strategies. How are your customers thinking about their emissions reduction strategies? And from the perspective of effectiveness and P&L, What emissions reduction technologies are you and Baker Hughes customers most excited about? How many of these are based in AI and efficiencies through data management? And how do you see the deployment of particular solutions differing by region and jurisdiction? A lot to unpack there.
There's a lot. Okay, there's like
let's
10 different things
yeah.
in there. Okay, so I'm going to try to back it up to the first part. It's worth noting that depending on where, like the type of company that's our customer and whether or not it's in what I would refer to as democratically elected countries versus ones that are not.
Mm-hmm.
The pace of the energy transition moves at different speeds, right? And so some people talk about that, but it's worth noting it's a little bit, if you look at like the EU and the US, the pace in which we are going down the energy transition is one's got regulations, the other one's got incentive programs. And then you've got the national oil companies, right? That's mandated, okay? And then it's like, do they mandate it? And then, what is their pace, right? And so depending on whether or not you've got a publicly traded customer in a fairly that's listed in a democratic country versus something that's happening in a state oil company in say like the Middle East or some other part of the world, the pace is different. What they're thinking about acquiring for solutions today is also different. Mm-hmm. And so we do see that sort of bifurcate based on the region and the type of company. Then there's the space that we want to get into more is offering the abatement solutions for the non-oil and gas parts of the world, because there's a lot of really good applicability of what we're doing for other sectors as well. And so that's something it's going to be slow, but we're gaining momentum on that. Now, the technologies that our customers then are engaging on, as I said, based on those parameters, it really depends on where you're at and who it is. And so we see some traction on hydrogen. Okay, we see definitely traction. We've had traction on CCS for a long time, mostly as it comes to the storage side or the compression side, but give it some time and we've got a really great piece of technology that is direct air capture that we're trying to grow and scale right now, and some other investments as well. Geothermal still moving along, not as fast as we like it, but there are lots of great areas. Now, methane is an area that is of interest to all actors. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it doesn't matter what kind of country, whether it's publicly traded, private, or a state-owned oil company, everybody cares about methane.
Okay. That's very interesting. I think finally then, just drawing on the abatement piece, we've seen the introduction of a lot of new methane regulations from bodies such as the US EPA. Yeah. It seems that methane monitoring and abatement is fast becoming just simply a cost of doing business. It's going to become the norm, and I'm sure this won't be a topic that's on panels in years to come. So how are Baker Hughes helping its clients and energy companies to prepare for these regulated disclosures and to set up the right processes and controls over GHG data to establish competitive advantage over peers?
There's a couple of different ways of answering that one. So I would say in how we help our customers out of the starting gate is depending on that type of company that's our customer, people are in different readiness states, right? And so a couple of years ago, people were really interested in thinking about what's our abatement option, what are we going to do? But now with major geographies going into a mandated reporting programs, they've got to kind of pivot and say, how do we do that? We do spend a non-trivial amount of effort in actually working with customers that are just getting started on the journey to say, here's how we're doing it. It's not the final answer, but we can help you skip a couple of years of dithering and get you to a solution. And then once they understand the magnitude of the problem, then it makes a lot of sense on the investment side. So my team spends quite a bit of time in that. I have a part of my team that's focused on emissions and climate analytics. And what we end up doing is coming in and saying, here's how we've looked at semi to full automation of data production. And so as companies are interested in the MRV part, that's their starting ground. Now with methane in particular, because methane is something that anybody could actually measure with the right equipment, mm-hmm. You can't really hide it. That's why that's the center of what we're talking about. We have commercial solutions today that help with different parts of where methane might be leaking, or even on the detection side, like people forget that we have inline inspection capabilities so that if you had a pipeline, you don't want it to leak, as well as external inspection capabilities. So we've got a lot to offer in that space. But right now, companies want to understand how to first understand the magnitude of the problem.
Great. Well, there's a lot to get your head around and a lot of different sort of perspectives depending on who you're engaging with across the value chain. But Allyson, it's been great speaking with you. Really enjoyed hearing your insights on the panel, chatting with you now, and look forward to keeping in touch and following the progress.
Thanks for having us.